Thank you very much, David. A question most project managers must be thinking about is that they see their risk register and they're trying to sort of say, well, how risky is my project? And presumably you just look at, oh, you've got lots of high probability and impact risks, and that must be a risky project.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I struggled with this when I very first came into risk management in 1984. Gosh, it's a long time ago. And I did my first ever risk assessment, and I wrote a nice report, and I took it to the project manager, and the project sponsor was there, and they said, "This is nice. We understand all the list of risks you've got here. How risky is the project?" And I went, "Well, you've got 10 red ones and 15 yellow ones and 30 green ones, and there we are." I said, "Yeah, I know, I can see that, but is it okay?" And I had no answer. I couldn't tell if that number of reds and greens was acceptable or not. And there is no way. It's just intuitive. Oh, lots of red things, it must be bad, or it must be uncertain if you include red opportunities, big opportunities. So we struggled with that for years. How do you, is there some kind of number you can draw out of the risk scores and add them all up? But that depends on the number of risks you've identified. Can we look at the average severity of risks? And nothing seemed to fit the bill until I guess about 10 or 12 years ago, and suddenly the penny dropped. There is a way to do this, which starts with that key phrase, risk is uncertainty that matters. And if we ask the question, overall, how risky is my project, we're asking two questions. How uncertain is the project, and how much does that matter to the overall success of the whole project? We're not looking at individual things, we're looking at the combined effect of all forms of uncertainty on the project as a whole, not on individual objectives. So it's some kind of summarising or combining that we're looking for. So the overall riskiness of the project is a summary of all of the effect of all of the different types of uncertainty, uncertain future events, variability in the tasks that we're going to do, ambiguity about parts of the project that we don't fully understand, and some kind of allowance for emergent risks that arrive during the lifetime of the project. Putting all those things together, some of them are threats and some of them are opportunities. How risky is the project? And so if we're thinking about the uncertainty dimension, how do you measure that for the project? The question would be, if we phrased it like this, what is the probability that the overall project will succeed? Now that is a measure of uncertainty of the whole project. And if we said, so uncertainty that matters, what kind of impact am I interested in for the whole project? We might say, well, what is the potential variation in the project's outcome? So we've got objectives. We might have a time objective. Well, what's the potential variation in my schedule, in my outturn date? We've obviously got a budget objective. What's the potential variation in that budget? How likely am I to hit it? And what's the potential size of the variation? And the same for technical performance, or for regulatory compliance, or for hitting safety targets. The uncertainty that matters question at the whole project level is, how likely am I to succeed, and what's the range of potential outcomes for the whole project?
So having positioned the thesis of, well, this is how we're going to determine the overall project success likelihood, you could say, and the range of it, what sort of techniques are you needing to apply to actually work that out?
Yes, and this is where the penny dropped as sort of a duh moment. Why didn't we see this before? If you want to combine together a number of sources of uncertainty and see what effect there will be on the overall outcome of the project, and assess the probability of success of the project and the likely variation, it's quantitative risk analysis. That's what we do in quantitative risk analysis. So we build a simulation model of the project as a whole, and into that we put the baseline plan, then we put the uncertain future events, then we reflect variability on our planned tasks and the effect of ambiguity on that. And then we have a contingency allowance, perhaps using a critical path technique, critical chain technique. All of those things together, then you run a Monte Carlo simulation and you will get the S-curve, which will tell you the likelihood of hitting your targets and the potential variation in the outcome. And if you do a combined cost and time simulation, which is best practice, then you get a view of the overall riskiness of the whole project in terms of all the key dimensions. So we can answer the question, how likely is the project to succeed? Because that comes straight off my Monte Carlo S-curve. And we can answer the question, what's the potential variation in outcome? Again, straight off the S-curve between, let's say, the 10% and 90% points. So we've had the answer in our grasp all along. We just weren't applying it to this overall project risk question. So now I come to my project sponsor or my client and I say, okay, I've done the analysis, we've looked at all the risks, we've worked out the effect on the whole project. You have a 35% chance of succeeding. There's a 20% chance that you could underrun, and maybe you'll be $1 million under, and there's a 70% chance you could overrun, and maybe you might be 5 million over. There's still a question, is that okay? You're expressing how risky the project is by saying it has a less than 50% chance of succeeding with this range of potential outcomes. But still the project sponsor or the client or the business owner has to make a decision on whether that's acceptable or not. And that's a different question. First question, how risky is the project? Now we have a way of answering that. Is that okay? That's a different question altogether. And that's the question of risk appetite, which we've talked about separately. But now we're giving some quantification, some numbers to our project sponsor, business owner, client, to be able to say, well, you make the decision about if it's okay or not, but here is the actual facts, the position about how risky the project is. So overall project risk has been around for a while. Now we have the ability to quantify it and express it in terms which are useful to the decision makers so they can decide. We tell them how risky the project is, they decide if that's okay or not.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure.